What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Appreciate you joining me today. More importantly, joining me today is the one and only Justis Mosqueda. We are back together to do the great 53-man roster debate of 2023. Justis and I have not compared notes. I don't know how much of a debate this is going to be. Maybe we have the exact same 53-man roster, which is going to make for awful podcasting. But Justis, awesome to have you back. Great to be talking to you once again.
Yeah, let's go. It's feeling real, right? Three preseason games in the books.
This is going to be fun, I think, because I've always told you, I always respect like where your mind goes with this stuff. And I think we probably are both going, my guess is like maybe in mostly the same direction, but with a couple different nuances. So I think this is going to be fun to debate. Before we get there, we do have an announcement to make, and I'm incredibly excited. Justis and I are going to be partnering together this year, both on the Pack-A-Day podcast and for Acme Packing Company. We're going to be doing a co-branded, co-sponsored podcast once a week throughout the entire course of the season. So that will be up both on Acme Packing Company as well as the Pack-A-Day podcast, YouTube, and our audio podcast as well. So Justis, I cannot be more excited to A, announce that, and B, to be talking to you all season long.
Yeah, I'm excited. You reached out to me about it, and I was like, sure, sounds good to me. So we're going to be doing that.
Anytime we get to talk Packers, it usually ends up being a pretty fun conversation. So hopefully everyone else agrees. If not, oh well, it'll be for our enjoyment nonetheless. So that's worth it in and of itself. But no, it's going to be great. I cannot wait. But before we jump into the actual 53, I do want to ask you, like I mentioned that this maybe could go in a couple different directions, but did you feel like this was one of the more unpredictable ones to make? Was this a easier one, a harder one? Like, where's your confidence meter as far as putting together this 53-man roster?
I feel like the 50, I'm super confident. Those last three, it can go in a couple directions, and I think that's really what people for the most part are arguing about. I put up a post on APC where it was basically like predict your own 53, like stake claim, you get bragging rights if you get it right, and people pretty much are arguing about like 3 spots. So
yeah, that's where I'm kind of at too. I do think and we'll get into all of it, but I do think some of the injury situations and maybe more like even towards like a practice squad sort of determination, released with an injury or waived injured, which means that they're probably not going to get claimed and then they get put on IR and then you got to figure out the injury designation. I feel like that kind of throws a wrench into some things. Like Romeo Doubs just got hurt. Not that that's going to change his status, but it could potentially change the thinking on some of the other wide receivers. Like we'll get into all of it position by position, but I do think there's a few different ways that some of this stuff could go. And I'm very intrigued to see how Brian actually manages it. But before we spoil all the good convo, let's jump in right away. We'll go position by position. We'll start with quarterback, which is usually always like the most fun topic to discuss anytime you're listening through. And this one, it's kind of lame and kind of boring. So let's just get it over with. I'm assuming, obviously, Jordan Love, Sean Clifford. And then I think the only question remaining is, do you have Alex McGough on the practice squad? Do you think he just gets outright released? Or where are you at with Alex McGough?
Oh, they're going to have to keep a third guy on the practice squad. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to move off of McGough unless there's some project out there that you would rather have. But, you're one injury away from that guy having to be the backup, right? So I just assume they're going to keep him as the PS guy.
Yeah, that's what I have as well. Obviously, loving Clifford 1-2, no third 53-man roster quarterback. I do think there's a potential possibility that if the right guy gets waived, that they would potentially be interested in adding maybe a different quarterback to the practice squad. But obviously, any other team is going to want to keep that guy probably on their practice squad too. So right. I will say Alex McGough makes it on the practice squad as well, and that's probably the only conversation that we need to have about quarterback, unless you feel otherwise.
That sounds good to me. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there is the small minority of the Sean Clifford truthers out there.
Wait, the Sean Clifford truthers or the Alex McGough truthers?
There's the Sean Clifford truthers who want him to start. Have you not seen that?
I've seen that. I have seen some Alex McGough truthers as well that feel like either he's
throwing like 5 passes.
I don't make things I'm not making it up for the sake of making it up. Like I've literally seen it. He's not getting a fair shake. He should be on the 53. I've even seen some like he's not getting a chance to start. I'm like, okay. I don't even know where to go with that. But no, Jordan Love should be the starter.
Birmingham Stallions fans?
Yeah, I guess. Huge fans. But no, Jordan 1, Sean 2, Magoo practice squad, and we'll end our quarterback conversation there before we get into a territory we probably don't want to go in. All right, running back is, I think, one of the interesting ones. I'll let you take over. Where are you at with your head on running back? Obviously Jones and Dillon, and then where do we go from there?
I think they keep 2, just like they did last season, because I don't think Patrick Taylor is significantly better than he was last offseason, and he didn't make the 53 last offseason. At the end of the day, the Packers gave 11 carries to non-Jones, non-Dillon backs last year. The third running back spot is more about playing special teams than it is actually running the rock. I think if Dillon or Jones go down, the first guy called up in that scenario, right, is going to be Emmanuel Wilson.
Yeah.
But I think at the beginning of the season, when you need these guys to play special teams reps and stuff, I think that nod is going to go to Patrick Taylor. But I don't think that they're really worried about him getting claimed off of the practice squad. So I think they're just going to start him there, play his 2 games at the beginning of the season, and then play it from here at that point.
I am the king of 2 running backs. I had predicted that very early.
I fought against it, and then I just looked at how the numbers shook out, and I'm just kept going back to, did Patrick Taylor impress more than he did last summer? And the answer is no. He's the same guy. I mean, he's Mr. Consistent. That's why he has a job in the NFL, right? But they weren't willing to pull the trigger last year. I can't imagine why that would change this year.
So despite being the king of 2 running backs and predicting it last year, I think before just about anyone, and obviously they kept 2 running backs last year, I have Patrick Taylor on my 53. And here is why. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I would not be shocked at all if they just released Patrick Taylor and brought him back in the practice squad and felt pretty darn confident that they would be able to do so. My only reasoning as of this point for keeping him on the 53, in some weird sort of way, I do feel like the Tyler Davis injury has sort of changed my thinking a little bit on how they need to sort of keep some players for special teams, because I think they're going to have to be sort of a special teams by committee. I'm not saying Patrick Taylor is going to take the Tyler Davis snaps in any way, shape, or form, but I do feel like that maybe, just maybe, Rich Bisaccia might get a bone or 2 at some other positions because he lost his number 1 special teams guy from a season ago. I do think Patrick Taylor is going to be a core special teamer for this team. And I do think, he's been basically the number 3 running back from day one. I'm not, like I said, I'm in complete lockstep with you where I think they can release him, get him back in the practice squad, call him up when they want to. I also was at a point where I felt really comfortable with the 53 that I put together with Patrick Taylor on it and didn't lose anyone that I wanted to lose. And it just, to me, made sense of, all right, if we can get the third running back on there, he's obviously somebody that can do the third down stuff. He catches the ball well, and he can be a core special teamer. And there's a reason why we'll get to maybe a little bit later, probably a position where you kept somebody that I didn't. But I felt Patrick Taylor was going to be the nod over maybe one of those other guys. So I went Taylor. Would not be shocked if they went with a different guy who also had special teams experience at another position, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, a little bit later.
Yeah, and that's when, injuries and stuff like that become important, right? Because this is such a razor thin edge at the bottom of the roster. Patrick Taylor, for reference, I'm the nerdy guy who watches the special team stuff, right? Patrick Taylor did replace Davis as one of the wings on punt protection. Okay. And, that's a position that for the most part they play tight ends, right? That's why you see Patrick Taylor having such a significant value on special teams, is because he's that bigger body that can actually play in those roles. Emmanuel Wilson got 0 starts on the 4 core special teams units, right? Kick return, punt return. No one makes the team because of field goal block or field goal protection, right? Yeah. Tyler Goodson made 1 start. That was as a kick returner in the first game, and who the other backs didn't get any of those starts on special teams. Patrick Taylor got 8 of those opportunities. That tied for the team high with Donald Levitt. The only other guy with 6 or more than 6 is Eric Wilson, the inside linebacker, who's that's why those 2 guys, right? That's why they're in Green Bay, Levitt and Wilson special teams. So I think that's a big feather in Taylor's hat.
One of the things I looked at this last year of like, all right, who played the most special teams in preseason last year and how did it equate over? And like the top 6 guys that played special teams last year all got cut. It was like Ty Summers and Patrick Taylor and like a bunch of other guys. So, I mean, I think maybe Davis.
That's why I just look at the starts now. I don't care about the
actual
overall
snaps. That's
special
smart.
team snaps.
But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. Let me just ask you really quick. So I'm assuming you have Emmanuel Wilson. Did you put together a practice squad as well, or?
So I haven't, but I would assume, yeah. I mean, they'd keep. I would think that they would keep both, which I think is an interesting situation with Goodson, right? I mean, Goodson was kind of a lot. I mean, he got first team reps on family night, and that guy might go from first team reps on family night to with the shoulder injury, maybe getting waived injured, right, and just not coming back to the practice squad.
That's what I have as well. I have Emmanuel Wilson on the practice squad. Obviously, I have Patrick Taylor on the 53. And then I have Goodson, Nichols waived injured basically because they're not back yet, which I'm assuming they're going to have to figure out an injury designation for them. And then Nate McCrary just being straight up cut. So I only have one running back on the practice squad. I'm sure they'd love to find a way to keep Goodson and Nichols. And if they can do so, awesome. But with the injury, I think it certainly complicates things. And that's where I think things start to get a little bit muddled with some of the injury designations and whatnot.
Yeah, with Nichols specifically, I mean, you have him still on a 4-year contract. I wonder if they would place him on IR, but they're in a cap crunch, and the IR guys do count against your cap. So I don't know if they would just want to call their shot there. I mean, we already saw with Jake Hansen, right? Obviously, you know, his injury wasn't a huge deal, but they could have kept him on IR and then tried to negotiate a future contract with him if they wanted to. And they just said, let's waive him injured and then release him with a injury settlement. So
for what it's worth, I thought Taylor, Wilson, and Goodson all looked better than Lou Nichols anyway. So I don't know that it's going to be that big of a loss, but yeah, that I think the practice squad and injury stuff will be interesting. And then if they do keep the third or not, could easily see them going with 2. But I had Taylor on for my official prediction. All right, let's jump to wide receiver. Watson, Dobbs, Reed, locks. And then, you know, where do you go from there with your next guys and how confident are you in some of those next decisions?
I fought Malik Heath up until the last preseason game. And then seeing him get the start at outside receiver was important. I mean, they didn't move around Jaden Reed, right? So their role for Jaden Reed is just you're going to be in the slot every single time. And if one of Dobbs or Watson goes out, you know, it's going to be Heath coming up. Yep. I think Toure is probably the next guy, just based off of the way that they've used them. Dontavian Wicks is so kind of frustrating because you don't really know what you have because of the concussion, and then he had another injury later on, right? Yep, hamstring. I think all those guys make the team. And then after that, I mean, if you're Bob Melton, who a lot of people were excited about when he got picked up off of waivers, like you're behind the 8 ball. If you're Grant DuBose, you're behind the 8 ball. Like it's the log jam at the wide receiver position. But I do think the fact that Keith was able to take that step and contribute on special teams in preseason game 3 helps him out.
So you have 6 with Wicks, Toure, Heath, Reed, Dobbs, and Watson, right?
Yep.
All right. And then so releasing DuBose, releasing Bonds, Crest, Watts, and Melton.
Yep.
All right. We see.
By the way, Deuce Watts has a twin brother in college football right now. His name is Fat Watts with a PH. Amazing.
That is amazing. Fat and Deuce. That's phenomenal. And Deuce is spelt wrong too. It's D-U-E or D-U-E, D-E-U, whatever it is. It's the opposite of what it should be. But either way, that is amazing. We are 3 positions in and we disagree again, which is amazing. I have DuBose making it as well. I have 7 on the 53, same that they kept last year, except they only had the 2 running backs. But I'm going all in. Here's where I'm at. I don't think this Green Bay team should release anyone that has like legitimate potential. I don't care about like how many players are at each spot. And to me, Grant DuBose showed enough both in practice, well, mostly in practice, that I don't want to give up on him quite yet. Like I think there's enough upside there where I doubt he gets claimed, but at the same token, I like why even risk it? And if that meant releasing, in my scenario, a Patrick Taylor, or probably I could name another player who we'll get to in a moment over that, then I would happily do so just to kind of keep the potential of that player. I actually would have maybe leaned towards more of maybe even, and I know a couple other people initially mentioned this, and I thought I didn't think anything of it, But Samori Toure is a name that I was almost closer to being like, maybe they move on from, except what complicated things there is Romeo Doubs may not be ready week 1, and Dontavian Wicks may not be ready week 1, and Grant Dubose is not ready to play. And then, like, I don't know that you just want to go with Watson, Doubs, like Heath. Like, I don't, and then probably Dubose would have to be your 4 in that situation. So I think Toure still makes it. And I think they ultimately go at 7. And I think that's going to be a spot where you could have Wicks and Dubose probably being inactive for like every year unless there's, or every week unless there's injuries. And then that's where you call up players to support on special teams with those guys being inactive.
Okay, here's a question I have for you.
So
Samori Toure seems to be like the number 2 kick return option behind Keyshawn Nixon right now. The way that the team has played these guys out there, right? And
I think he's the number 3. I know that's how they've done it, but I think it's Nixon, Reed, and then Toure. And then I think punt returner is going to be Reed, Nixon, and then Toure.
I wonder if those reps end up going to Toure during the season, because Nixon is going to be in the slot full time. Nixon, it's not like Nixon wasn't on the field on the defensive side of the ball during the preseason, but I don't think he returned a single kick.
No, but I think he's going to, if I had to guess, I don't think they're going to stop the best kick returner in football last year from kick returning, would be my guess. I do think if you go back and watch some of his punt returns last year, he was still dynamic, but I didn't think he was quite as good as a punt returner as he was a kick returner. And like, you see him field punts and he never like drops it, but like, it is wild. Like it is the most unorthodox. Like he's catching it over his head sometimes. Like he's all over the place. He always catches it, but it doesn't it's not as natural. You watch Jaden Reed return punts and it's the most natural looking thing in the world. Like now, of course, he's going to like muff the first 3, gets an opportunity on just to make me look stupid, but it's literally like the most natural thing. So if I had to guess, I think especially because he'll just be done, playing defense on punt returns, obviously. And I guess he could be theoretically, if they just scored or whatever, but I think they're going to let Nixon kick return. I think they're going to keep him off a punt return for that reason.
Okay. That's the only other thing that, like, in the back of my head, I'm like, Toure can do this thing that most of these other guys can't. So
yeah, I still
lean 6, and I still lean Toure over Dubose. The thing with Dubose is like, because to your point, right, you're gonna have to like essentially redshirt these guys.
Yep.
I don't understand really what the clear benefit of Dubose redshirting is if he's already behind these guys on the depth chart. Because sure, he's on a 4-year contract, rookie deal, that stuff has value. Watson, Doubs, and Toure are on 3-year contracts, and Reed, Wicks, and Heath are on 4. So
my counter would be, and I know it didn't happen like all right away last year, but like, show me the reason why Rasheed Walker, Luke Tenuta, and Caleb Jones all need a red shirt for a season last year at offensive tackle too, when you've got Zach Tom, Bakhtiari, et cetera. So to me, it's the biggest thing that I wanted to do first is keep the 53, as much as I could, the 53 most talented players on the roster, and then, supplement the rest based on call-ups from the practice squad later. And there's, of course, going to be injuries, and then you can, just sign the people that you need to fill in on certain positions after that. But to begin with, use your practice squad call-ups to supplement special teams, and if you actually need a depth piece later. And especially if you look at Goody's track record too, already probably having to release Lou Nichols at running back, him having to release 2 draft picks. He's going to lose too much sleep over it. So I'm going Grant Dubose on the roster. But I could easily see a world in which Toure or Dubose don't make it either. I think the other 5, Watson, Doubs, Reed, Heath, and Wicks are locks at this point, unless Wicks is hurt and they to the point where they keep him on the initial and then IR him the next day to potentially bring him back. That could be a potential as well. But if we're just talking opening 53, I'm still going 7 here.
Fair.
All right. We'll look at our discrepancies at the end. We'll do tight end and fullback all together, whatever we want to consider Pearson and DeGuara at this point. But I'll start on this one. I had 3. I had Musgrave, Kraft, and DeGuara. No Austin Allen, although I think he did have a really nice last game. It wouldn't shock me if he made it, but I think Musgrave, Kraft, DeGuara. I have a player later that I'm going to move to IR and then pick up a tight end via waivers or trade or whatever they end up doing.
I had Pearson.
Really?
I had Pearson making it. I know he's dealing with the injury right now. Led the team in special team starts, started on all 4 units in preseason week 2, which was the last time that we saw him. Obviously injury is going to be a big thing here, right? Because I think if he is banged up and he's not ready to go week 1, I think you just waive injured or IR him, and then you hit waivers and go and pick up another tight end somewhere that can give you some sort of contribution there on special teams, which is what I think he would be doing because DeGuara is already going to get those fullback snaps. But I feel real firm about Musgrave, Kraft, DeGuara. I think the people who are like DeGuara should get cut he plays such a unique role for this team. Like, it's just not going to happen. He just opens up the playbook for them. And I understand why you would want a backup fullback, as dumb as that sounds. If Tagora is a combo fullback tight end and you need more special teams reps and Pearson's that guy, then I think you lean him. I just think overall, if Pearson is healthy, you would lean him over Austin Allen, in my opinion.
That very well could be, certainly based on special teams alone. I'm assuming if you had to choose between DeGuara and Pearson, would you go DeGuara in that situation?
For sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. There was a part of me that entertained the DeGuara stuff for a little bit. Once Tyler Davis went down, I felt like it was just basically a no-brainer at that point. Like even then, I think he was probably going to make it, but the Davis injury just cemented it, in my opinion. Musgrave, Kraft, DeGuara. And you had Pearson. I have nobody, but I have them at some point after the initial 53 claiming someone or getting someone else on this roster in some capacity.
That makes sense. I think there's a couple positions, right? That maybe guard, safety. I think those are the 3 positions where Packers fans are probably going to be looking at the waiver wire and saying, like, this guy's available on the cheap contract. Go pick him up.
I think corner too could be a sneaky one, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, offensive line. I'll let you take the reins here. How many do you have, first of all?
10.
I have 10 as well. I'm 99.9% sure we will not have the same 10, but you go for it.
All right. Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, Tom. That's going to be your starting offensive line.
Yep.
Swing tackle is going to be Rasheed Walker. Backup swing tackle now is going to be $4.3 million 1-year contract, Josh Nijman.
Gritting your teeth saying it.
The backup guard I have is Royce Newman, and then his backup is Sean Ryan, and then the last guy is Caleb Jones, just because he seems like he's been playing decent. I know a 5th tackle on this team, plus Elton Jenkins, who would see the field at tackle before Jones would ever get on the field. I know that's a lot of bodies, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty with the Bakhtiari situation moving forward. So. And, Nijman's only on a 1-year deal. Who knows? He might get traded by the time this thing gets posted. So
the Yash thing is super interesting. Let's go there first. You brought up the main thing, right? The $4 million deal as your top swing tackle, as a starting tackle, you're cool with it. As your top swing tackle, you're probably still cool with it. As your second swing tackle, that's a lot of money. And I do think and I've talked about this a little bit before, like in a vacuum, I think it makes sense to trade/cut. My only hesitation is the Bakhtiari situation where he could wake up tomorrow and just be like, oh, not going to be able to play this season. And you just don't it's such a, you just a complete crapshoot with how many games he's going to be able to play this year. And I feel like if you never had that injury situation, you feel really comfortable with Bakhtiari, Tom, and then Cheat as your swing guy. I think just in Love's his first year as a starter, just having a little extra, veteran offensive tackle there, if he needs to step in, could be beneficial. But yeah, I think it's a legitimate possibility that Yash could be gone.
Yeah, I mean, again, Bach, Tom, Walker, Nijman, and that's not including Jenkins potentially kicking out. And they seem to like Jones. The big thing I think the Packers need to do at this point, right? Because I do think, a premier swing tackle, which is what Nijman I think still is. I think they just like Walker, is like $4.3 million. That matches up. He's going to get more than that when he hits the open market. Here's the problem. Are the Packers going to spend in free agency? Because if they're going to spend in free agency next season, then they're not going to get a compensatory pick back.
Yeah.
So you just get a pick for this guy and create some cap space. This is there's basically 2 ways for the Packers to create cap space right now. If you are looking at the safety market or something like that down the line, it's extend Rashawn Gary and then get Josh Nijman's contract off the books. Josh's contract is going to be the 4th most expensive in terms of cash for the Packers offense this year. He's the 4th tackle. tackle. So, like, he's going to make more in cash than Owen Jenkins does this year, for perspective.
I do think there is another like conversation potentially point here too of like all those positions we just discussed. Is there like a $3 or $4 million tight end that some team has an extra tight end? Is there a $3 or $4 million guard instead of a tackle where they're like, you know what, we would rather have the guard than the tackle? Is the same thing at safety, at potentially at a backup corner if they can play special teams as well. Like I think that they could potentially swap, and we know how desperate teams are for more offensive line depth. I think that there could be a team that's like, hey, we'll take, you know, Yash in the contract and we'll give you one of ours that we have an excess of. And I think there could be a player for player swap there at some point as well.
Yeah, or even a 4th. I mean, I know we don't need another draft pick. What, they're set for like 11 next year already? Like, we're going to have to cut draft picks left and right just because we're taking so many at this point. But yeah, I mean, gives you another opportunity, another at bat.
Absolutely. All right. So, but I had one difference than you. I did not have Royce on my final 53. I think we've seen the end of the Royce Newman era. I think I'm going to be the only person in the world with this name on the 53. I do have Luke Tenuta on the 53. And I have multiple reasons why. I just don't know the extent of the injury. He did say it was the most, like Matt said, it was the most serious besides Tyler Davis, but like he didn't also say it was like the season ending, right?
And that was 3 weeks ago. We haven't had like any sort of update, really.
We haven't had any update. And Tyler Davis went on IR, and I feel like they've had multiple opportunities to waive him release to pick up guys that they've picked up, and they haven't done it. And it was just like, it's low hanging fruit at that point. Like, unless you plan on keeping him on the roster for that first day and then putting him on IR, I can't think of a logical reason why you would not just do the Tyler Davis situation, waive him injured, put him on IR, and then figure out the injury settlement at another point in time. The other thing too that I keep going back to, if you remember towards the end of last year when they were looking at, like, when they were putting their active players together, a lot of times it was like Rasheed Walker and Caleb Jones and those guys were on the inactive list, or like even and Luke Tenuta was the one that was being active on game days. And I don't know. Like, again, those are the things that like just have stuck with me for some reason. I'm probably just wrong. I think that's the most likely scenario here. And you end up releasing him with an injury designation and he probably ends up on IR. But I just like the one thing I don't know why they wouldn't have done it already if that was their plans. And full transparency, I put my full roster together of everyone that I wanted to keep, and I had 52. And I didn't have Tenuta on there in the first one. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to claim a tight end. So I need an extra roster spot anyway. After the day after, you can put him on IR. You can bring 8 guys back from IR through the course of the season if you want to do it. That's where I went. Like I said, I'm probably just wrong on that one, but I can't get out of my head that they haven't done it yet.
No, I think the logic there is sound. Newman getting cut would be interesting. I mean, here's the problem with the Newman thing. I understand Newman has not been playing good. I get that. But and people compare it to like Amari and stuff like that. At least you knew there was a player behind Amari who could play better than Amari. I don't know if that's the case with Newman. This team doesn't have a backup center at this point. Yeah, can we afford to lose the only interior offensive lineman who's a backup who has like any sort of playing experience in the NFL? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe like if you pick a guy up off of waivers that you feel good about, I could see doing that. But you got to have, the bird in the hand to be able to make that decision. Yeah,
to me, Zach Tom's your first interior depth piece on the interior of the offensive line. So, like, if anything happens, left guard, center, right guard, Zach Tom's going in and starting there. And then Rasheed Walker is probably your next guy up at tackle, and then Yash after that at tackle. And then I think you have another guy that I think they feel better about now than they did at any point, obviously, last year, in Sean Ryan as your next piece after there. And I think from a center standpoint, we know Josh is probably going to be your day one center. Zach Tom is your backup center. John Runyon Jr., they've spent cross-training time at center all off season. We know Elton could be one of the best starting centers in the league at any moment that they want to make that move if they wanted to. And they cross-trained a little bit of Sean Ryan at center as well. So like, again, it's a lot of it's not ideal. I think you'd like to just keep Zach outside, Elton at left guard, Sean Ryan not at center, John Runyon Jr. not at center, etc. But the fact that they've cross-trained all those guys and put them there, but you're 1,000,000% right at the guard situation or position where it's like interior offensive line starts getting, because if you look at it just from like, all right, Myers, Runyon, Jenkins, Tom, Sean Ryan, you've got 5 guys, even out of a group of 10, that can play interior offensive line at all at that point. Now, I think they might like Empey a little bit, enough to at least put him on the practice squad and like call him up if there were like a serious issue or whatever. But it does become a little bit of an issue if you have injuries after those first couple.
I'm with you. I think the Newman thing is the really interesting one, because I would understand the rationale. I'm just trying to think of like, how can you protect yourself a little bit so you don't have, you're spending all these roster spots on offensive tackles, right? With the logic being, we need to protect Jordan Love in his first year as a starter. Don't have him lose confidence. And you're like, what, 2 injuries away from the guard position just being a void. Yeah.
I just don't know that it's that much different with Royce on the roster, but yes, I do know what you mean. All right, let's continue on. Defensive line. I had 5. I did not keep Jonathan Ford. I had him on all my other iterations until the final one. I don't think that they are going to fret losing him all that much, and I think they're going to be able to get him back on the practice squad. So I just went Clark, Slayton, Wyatt, Brooks, and Wooden.
I went the logic that you did with Tenuta, where it was, they kept Jonathan Ford on the roster all last season, so they must seem to like him to a certain extent. They had a lot more, proven production, at least experience at the NFL level, on last year's defensive line. I think Ford makes the team. Really, it's just, I think they need that extra body at nose tackle. The Packers have been doing some interesting stuff. So obviously, Kenny Clark has moved to defensive end, right, from nose tackle. So the starting defensive line is Slayton on the inside, Clark and Wyatt on as the ends. They do a really interesting thing in nickel looks, though. So in nickel, they have Clark playing 3 tech, Slayton playing the nose tackle on like rundowns, base downs, right? Running situations. But then in passing situations, Wyatt is the 3 tech and Kenny Clark is like the pressure nose. I just wonder, like, say Slayton goes down, right? And then your nickel look is Devontae Wyatt and Kenny Clark, which is like what they only really want to use on like passing downs and stuff. I wonder if Jonathan Ford can kind of like sub in for Clark there and kind of give him a breather, because Wyatt, I don't think is going to play the nose. Wooden isn't going to play the nose. Brooks isn't going to play the nose. Like, they just kind of need another one of those bodies if 2 of the only 2 nose tackles on your team are also going to be starters in the 3-4
together. Yeah, no, I totally get that as well. And that was my initial thinking as well with Jonathan Ford. I don't know. I've gone back and forth probably on that one more than just about anyone else. And I like, it is, once you get after Slayton and Clark, like you mentioned, Wyatt, Brooks, Wooden, none of them are going to be great run defenders, in my opinion. They're more gap penetrators, pass down. The one thing I felt a little bit better about is, not that it helps at nose tackle either, but they're going to play like 80% nickel, if not more. And like, they're going to keep 2 of those guys in, and they're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. But they've also, I don't think we've seen, Lucas Van Ness really play on the interior. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that come regular season. And I think that could give them a little bit more depth there too. Like I said, not saying that that's going to solve the problem that you just mentioned, but that kind of gives them a potential 6th defensive lineman as well. So, and the fact that he was used in the defensive line in individual drills on like one of the last days of practice was like, so I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if they kept Ford. That's one, like I said, I went back and forth on, but on my final one, I had him off on just keeping the 5 guys. Ford making the practice squad, obviously.
Yeah, they unleashed hell in that like last practice when they didn't have fans around, huh? They
did a little bit.
They had Lucas Van Ness playing defensive line, and then they're like, yeah, we run the triple option now.
Yes.
Keep it quiet.
Yeah, it was literally like I don't know if it was specifically scripted to give the defense like a test of like we're going to run like everything. They ran triple option, they ran speed option, they ran
Yeah.
Musgrave pop pass, they ran a reverse to Romeo Dobbs, they ran jet sweep to Aaron Jones. Like they just threw the kitchen sink at and to be fair, the defense responded pretty much really well. I think the Jones pop pass maybe got like 8 to 10. Everything else, I think they held up pretty darn well again. So, but yeah, it was an interesting day.
Solid.
All right, edge. I kept the 6. I kept Scary
Wow.
Smith, Enigbare, Van Ness, Hollins, and Brenton Cox.
Let me look at my numbers right now. 32 players got a start on special teams this summer. Brenton Cox was not one of them. I just find it very hard to believe that it's possible to keep a 6th outside linebacker. And that's just a numbers game. They already have Lucas Van Ness. He's going to be working on punt protection. Kingsley Enigbare is going to be all over special teams. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. And maybe that's a situation where you look at Hollins' contract and you say, all right, this guy's on a 1-year deal. Cox is on a 4-year deal. Maybe we do think Hollins is the better player right now, but like we're swapping the contracts, right?
Right. Was
But
Hollins a core special teamer at all?
he got in, let me look up the number. He got in on 3, so he was like tied for like 15th in special teams. So nothing crazy. And a lot of that too was like week 2. And in the preseason, they sat a lot of the starters on special teams. So like Donald Levitt wasn't out there, for example.
Right.
And that's when Hollins got out there on like punt protection and stuff like that, that he's usually not going to be out there for. Like he's playing Quay Walker's spot. So I wouldn't consider Justin Hollins a core special teamer. That's where I'm at. Like there's no way. There's no way you can keep 6 outside linebackers. So you need to sit down and you need to decide on, do you want Hollins in or do you want Cox as the guy?
I totally agree, but also I'm still keeping 6. And the Hollins is the interesting one. And I did toy very much, full transparency. I did toy very much with actually keeping Brenton Cox off as well. This is one that, I don't know, maybe crowd think influenced me a little bit too much recently, because I know everyone is very pro Brenton Cox and wanting him to make the team. I do think there's some legitimate upside there. I don't think it's quite as much as people are hoping for / expecting it to be. I'm also at the point where, and one of the things that stuck in my head quite a bit is Brian in his press conference saying the other day, like, we got to get better. And like, we've got to let these young guys develop so that we can be better. And part of this is, how can you keep your young, talented players that could potentially be better down the road? And maybe you're right. Maybe that is just keeping Brenton Cox and releasing Justin Hollins. That's why I think this is such a unique, like, I think they could go in a variety of different ways. And we'll talk about some of these guys in just a moment, but like the Dallin Levitts, the Carrington Valentines, the Eric Wilsons, like some of these guys are veteran players on 1-year deals that are just special teams guys. Like you don't want, sorry, not Carrington Valentine, Corey Ballantyne. Sorry. You don't want Corey Ballantyne, Eric Wilson, Dallin Levitt really on the field on defense in any capacity. Like they're basically just there for special teams, but they're also Wilson, Levitt, specifically, and kind of Ballantyne are a little bit of your older players too. Like if you told, and I would be pretty surprised if they released Levitt, because I think Rich Bisaccia would literally like probably form a coup in some capacity.
Levitt does like really specific roles too.
Yeah.
Like he's the furthest inside guy running down on kickoff. He's the punt protector, personal protector on punt team. Like it's kind of a little different. Like
But if you told me like they went in a direction where like we're going to release the old guys and just go all young, I could see a world where maybe that happens. If you told me that they kept the Wilsons, the Ballantynes, the Levitts, the like core special teamers, like I could see that. Like that's where I think, because I do think they're sort of in this unique no man's land where they do have all this like interesting young talent, but they're also like kind of wanting to compete, and they also kind of want to put out there good special teams that, and it just, I don't know. I could see them going in a variety of different directions.
Rich is AHC now, and he was getting head coaching offers, right? Your film is your resume. So like,
yeah,
stuff's interesting. Politics, baby.
It is. All right. So you have Cox being cut in this scenario.
I do have Cox being cut. And yeah, I think he makes the PS. I don't. We always think that we're not going to get the guy, right? Someone's going to pick him up, but
no, nobody gets claimed. Yeah. No, I'm with you there. All right. I have 5 inside linebackers: Campbell, Quay, McDuffie, Wilson, and Carpenter.
Yep. I'm with you. I am a little iffier on Carpenter now, though.
Me too.
He's not being featured as much on special teams as I would have thought.
I don't think he likes playing linebacker either. I don't think he really wants to be there.
The way they talk about it is like they had to like sell him on that idea and stuff. And
yeah, I don't think he wants to be there.
I don't know. I have him, but like I wouldn't be surprised if, like, for example, like Henry Pearson made the team and Tariq Carpenter didn't, right?
Yeah.
Like a situation like that. So I am making that selection, but I'm holding it lightly.
Same. I'm in the 1,000,000% same category. I actually, I think in my last one, I don't think I had Carpenter on the team, or at least I was going to have him cut. And then I don't know. I don't think like some of the play he's had at linebacker too has been pretty iffy. I don't know. And again, how many guys that just play special teams can you keep on this roster is another thing too. So I think he's young enough, 7th round pick from a season ago, just making the transition. As you mentioned, not as much involved in special teams, but I think he still can be. That's a really, really interesting one. That's another one that I think could go a variety of different ways. All right, I'll let you lead it with corner, though. Actually, by the way, that's only the second position that we've agreed on so far, linebacker and quarterback, and we're both
there. We
go. Corner.
I have Jair, Rasul, Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Corey Ballentine. So I have all 5 of those guys. The Ballentine thing is just he plays so many special teams reps. And I know we're like, how many of those guys can you keep? I think Ballentine is one of those guys. The only guys who started on more special teams units this preseason were Levitt, Patrick Taylor, Eric Wilson, Valentine, Jonathan Owens, Enik Barre, and Tucker Kraft. So, he's up there with, the most premium looks on special teams. It's what he did last year. I think preseason game 3, they had 1 snap of dime finally. And, they threw him out there to get a look there. So, we know that he's higher up on the depth chart than like Shamar John Charles or Keandre Thomas and those type of situations, which is going to be important because, we're going to have another outside corner coming off of PUP eventually in Eric Stokes. So
speaking of which, I only kept 4 corners. I kept Jair, Rasul, Keyshawn, and Carrington. This is where I was able to keep the Patrick Taylors and the Luke Tenutas of the world. My reason being here is none of the other corners on the roster to me are worth a 53-man roster spot. And this could be a situation where maybe they claim somebody and make a move the next day at that cornerback position as well. It also wouldn't shock me if Ballentine and, Keandre Thomas and a couple of those guys, certainly Ballentine, but a couple of the other guys too, end up on the practice squad and you supplement your roster each week. Plus you've got Stokes coming back at some point, who I think is going to be, obviously a 5th guy on the roster. You've got Darnell Savage, who can play in the slot in a limited capacity too, if you needed to go in that direction. So for the time being, I think you go 4 on the active. You call up Ballentine for as long as you can. Call up Keandre Thomas or whoever else for as long as you can, until Stokes comes back, and then you have 5 on the roster. And then again, you could still call people up if you need to play some special teams. But I couldn't find anything that, outside of like, oh, well, you need them for special teams, which again, I think you can supplement by calling guys up, of like why I would ever want to keep a roster spot for Ballentine or Shamar Jean Charles or Keandre Thomas over guys like Grant Dubose or Brenton Cox, who I would much rather try and develop and even redshirt, especially with the ability to call guys up from the practice squad.
I guess it all depends on Bisaccia, right? What does he think they're capable of and how much swing does he have? Because
for the record,
I think these are real questions.
For the record, too, if I were to keep 5, Ballentine would have been the guy that I went with as well, and that was the guy I went back and forth with in a variety of different ways.
Shamar had a really good week 1 showing, and then
he did. I really liked what he did. That was like the only time I ever saw him play well in his entire time in Green Bay.
Like, where'd this come from? Fire lit under his ass, and then
we saw the same Shamar after that. Yeah, I don't think he has any chance of getting back, even on the practice squad. I'd be pretty surprised. All right. Safety, I got 5. I got Savage, Rudy Ford, Tavarius Moore, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Dallin Levitt. No Jonathan Owens.
I'd put Jonathan Owens there instead of Tavarius Moore. The injury thing, right? He has a knee.
Yeah.
We don't know how
I have no
big
idea.
of a knee. It just not enough to go on IR. That's all we know. Tavarius Moore was also a guy who got kind of phased out in week 2 of the preseason in terms of his safety snaps with the first team. He got jumped by Anthony Johnson, so that was a little concerning. Jonathan Owens was the starter in preseason week 1, was the starter on family night, is tied for 4th on the team in terms of special team starts. That's all I'm leaning there. It's just basically like they've used him there. I don't think he's any good.
He's bad.
I don't think he's any good. Fun story with the Simone Biles' husband thing, but yeah, I just kind of think Moore is the odd man out because of the injury and the way the momentum has just kind of been going at the safety position. But if Tavarius Moore made it and Jonathan Owens didn't, like my jaw wouldn't be on the floor or anything.
It does complicate things though, right? Because if Moore can't go week 1, right? Like, or if he's a couple weeks injured, and now we keep the 5 that I just mentioned. Now you've got Savage and Ford, and then Anthony Johnson Jr. is probably your next guy up at safety, and then Dallin Levitt after that. And I don't think you want Anthony Johnson Jr. or Dallin Levitt. I don't know that you necessarily want Darnell Savage or Rudy Ford at safety either. But that's another.
Levitt, you cannot play him on defense.
Which Dallin Levitt, you mean?
Yeah, Levitt, you cannot play on defense.
I've literally said take the S off by his name and just put a T next to it because he's not a safety; he's a special teamer.
Yeah.
But we'll put him there nonetheless. But no, you don't want him on the field in any capacity. So I do think the Tavarius Moore injury really complicates matters. The fact that Matt, I think, said it wasn't expected to be anything long term, and I think he even said day to day originally. Yep. I will say this: is not a perfect science by any means. It hasn't always been this way, but usually how it goes is the guys that are farther away from being able to return are inside in the Hudson Center and not doing any work outside. And usually the guys that are closer to returning are going to be outside working with trainers and sort of almost like ramping up to get ready to return, to get ready to practice. The guys that have been ramping up, ready to return to practice have been your, the 2 running backs, Tyler Goodson and Lou Nichols. Everyone else has basically been off to the side or working inside, etc. So like I said, it's not a perfect calculus by any means, but usually it's almost like inside and is when you're not close to coming back. Then when you're close to coming back, you're working outside with a trainer, and then you get activated only in individual drills, and then you do team, and then so on and so forth. So not a perfect science, but more often than not, it's in that capacity. And so far it's been just Goodson and Nichols that have been working on the outside that we've been privy to, for whatever that's worth.
No, I mean, that's good information. I mean, cut down to are they going to have another practice before cut downs?
I don't know. In fact, we're pretty much done now. So we won't be able to see any more team activities. The next practice is Wednesday and it's individual only. And then we have to leave. Thursday's individual only and we have to leave. Nothing today, Monday, Tuesday, and then nothing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then it'll be normal cadence starting the next week.
Yeah, because I can't remember what season it was, but it was a recent season where they had like practice like the day of cut down.
Yeah, it was last year. I'm almost positive.
Yeah. So I was wondering.
Not this year.
But yeah, man, I mean, if Moore's not ready, I just don't know how you could do it. And that's just my line of thought. Maybe I'm a dummy. Maybe I'm wrong. Wouldn't be the first time, but that's just how I'm thinking.
I've watched all of that Jonathan Ford tape or Jonathan Owens tape, excuse me. And it's not pretty at safety.
It's not good. It's not good.
We'll see. You could 1,000,000% be right there too. All right. Specialists. What do you got?
Well, I think Anders is going to win the kicker's job.
Clearly.
So I have Pat O'Donnell at punter. I just think like they'll probably be able to keep Waylon on the practice squad. And then next year you can just have Waylon in the tank. You don't have to decide when, O'Donnell's contract runs out. And then Orzech is the long snapper I have just because he's the guy getting first looks. Haven't been paying too much attention to the long snapper competition. So maybe I'm wrong there.
You're not alone. You're not alone. Yeah, I went Carlson and Orzech. I went back and forth a million times with Daniel Whelan and Pat O'Donnell. I ended up with Whelan. I think it probably might end up being O'Donnell, but like this is one again where I'm like, Brian said they have to get better. And O'Donnell's never getting any better. You know exactly what you have with Pat O'Donnell. He's 32 years old on a 1-year deal. And this is probably it. And you might say, like, well, just put, as you mentioned, like put Whelan on the practice squad, or like, if he can't beat out 32-year-old Pat O'Donnell right now on a team that's not expected to compete, like, it's just like, why even keep him on the practice squad at that point? Like, he's either good enough to be your potential future punter or he's not. And like, just make that decision now. And I think he might be. I think at least there's a higher upside with Whelan than there is with O'Donnell. And I think Brian has made the decision that there's going to be some growing pains this year with how he's crafted this team. I think they still have the ability to compete, but your status quo with O'Donnell and Whelan has a team control, 8 years younger, cheaper. Yeah. I think they go. It's a bold-ish take, and like I said, I went back and forth a million times, but I'm gonna stick with it.
Whelan got the first punt on Saturday with the first team special teams, and they really, if you want to look at how the Packers are going to use their special teamers this year, it seemed like week 3 of the preseason was like them actually trying. If that makes sense. Like week 2, throw that thing out. I mean, it's good to get the data on like where some of those guys end up playing, but it was mostly backups. The week 3, I think, is they were trying and they put out Whelan. So I don't know. Interesting one. I just think of it from the contract perspective. I'm like, yeah, just use O'Donnell's last year. You already paid him the bonus and stuff that. And then you have Whelan coming off of the bench for next season.
Yeah, and I think that very well could be the case too. And like I said, I think I'm probably just wrong on that one. I think they probably do keep O'Donnell. The holding is probably another really big thing for if you're going to have a rookie kicker, like give him an experienced holder. So I think that's probably the one that I am the most trepidatious about is like the holding piece of it. But I'm going to go Whelan. I'm going to stick with my guns on it. So here's where we came. Overall, we both had Love and Clifford at QB, no QB3. We both had Jones and Dillon. I had Patrick Taylor. You did not. We had Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Heath, Toure, and Wicks at wide receiver. I had Grant DuBose. You did not. I had Musgrave, Kraft, and DeGuara, which you had as well. You had Pearson, and I did not.
Yeah.
And then offensive line, we had 9 of the same players: Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, Tom, Walker, Nyman, Sean Ryan, and Caleb Jones, with sort of an asterisk next to Yash Nyman if they can get something potentially in return. You had Royce Newman. I had Luke Tenuta, and then basically Tenuta goes on IR the next day and they pick someone else up. Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Wyatt, Carl Brooks, and Colby Wooden we agreed on. I had just those 5. You had Jonathan Ford. We both had Gary, Preston, Enigbare, Van Ness, and Hollins. I had Brenton Cox. You did not. We both had Campbell, Walker, McDuffie, Wilson, and Carpenter at inside linebacker. We both had Alexander, Douglas, Keyshawn, and Carrington Valentine at corner. You had Corey Ballantyne at corner. I did not. And then we both had Savage, Ford, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Dallin Levitt. I had Tavarius Moore. You had Jonathan Owens. We both had Carlson and Orzik. You had O'Donnell. I had Whelan. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 disagreements overall. That's not bad. That's
not
good debate.
Bad.
Good conjecture.
That's good.
Yeah.
Like I said, for the most part, people are arguing about like those 3, like 3-ish. I guess like 6 is another number. Guys at the bottom of the roster. Everyone else is kind of sitting pat. And that was with some hot takes. I mean, that was with 4 corners. I didn't think we were going to get that.
Yeah, I know. See, I'm always thinking outside the box. I also think, like, Justin, this is how my weird, stupid mind thinks. Like, I think you could do some really crazy stuff where, like, if they really wanted to, like, keep guys on the 53 and put them on IR and sign guys back, I think you could legitimately go no punters, no long snappers on the 53 and get any of, like, if somebody claims whatever or like signs Pat O'Donnell, all right, we're going with Daniel Whelan. If somebody claims Matt Orzik, all right, we're going with Broughton Hatcher. And I think you're probably just comfortable like getting any of those guys back. Like, I think you could legitimately do that with some of the guys. We're just like, screw it. We'll figure this out after the case. We're going to keep our most important 53 first, put guys on IR, and then bring guys back.
I guess that is a possibility. I mean,
it's not a real possibility, but that's how my stupid mind works. So I don't think they'd probably do it with long snapper. I think they'd probably keep their, like, the long snapper that they wanted, unless it was like Hatcher, right? If they literally liked Hatcher better, then like just cut both, right? And then you could IR somebody the next day and bring whatever one back you wanted because nobody's claiming Broughton Hatcher.
Yeah.
But yeah.
If you're Pat O'Donnell and you get waived by the Packers at cut downs, do you come back and sign? I guess you want a job, but
you probably want the job, right?
yeah.
I mean, there have been situations before, especially like if like the Packers didn't want to make him a vested veteran, where like if like they kept Wheelan for week 1 and then said, hey, if you're still around week 2, we're going to pick you back up and add you as a non-vested veteran, unless Wheelan just like crushes it in week 1 or something. But like teams do weird, crap like that too, where like they don't want to pay a veteran like guarantee because he gets. Correct me if I'm wrong. If he's on roster week 1, he's guaranteed the whole season, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if he then didn't perform, right, that's when you get into the weird spot where it's like, well, like that's probably how the Packers end up getting a guy like Rudy Ford too, right?
Yep.
Where it's just, hey, we want you to play special teams, but special teams is fluid and we never know like when we're going to need to drop a guy. We can't commit to paying you for the entire season, so we're going to waive you and try to sign you back. And then lo and behold, the Packers are like, yoink, mine.
Yeah, we'll pick him up. Yeah, so I think that's going to be interesting. All right, so just to recap one more time, I had Taylor, Dubose, Tenuta, Cox, Moore, and Wheelan. You had Pearson, Newman, Jonathan Ford, Corey Ballantyne, Jonathan Owens, and Pat O'Donnell. All right, one last question for you, and then we'll get out of here. All right, of all the guys that I kept, Patrick Taylor, Grant Dubose, Luke Tenuta, Brenton Cox, Tavarius Moore, and Daniel Wheelan, which one do you think is the least likely to be on the 53?
Cox.
Brenton,
and I know people hate it. I know there's a lot of Cox fans. I'll put myself in timeout for that one. Didn't mean to do it. There's no way you can keep 6 outside linebackers. There's no way.
I
just don't understand what the value even in that contract is when Gary's about to get an extension. Van Ness is going to be on a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option, and Igbara has 3 years left on his contract. Like, is the
Edge
upside
4 next year, baby? Edge 4 2024.
Yeah, that's my thought. Is like, so like the upside to redshirting him is that he's going to be a non-special teams playing 4th outside linebacker. Like,
this is a team that,
more value.
This is a team that has redshirted Alex Light, Vernon Scott, Tim Boyle, Yosh Nijman, which turned out pretty darn well.
Yeah.
Man, like Caleb Jones, Rasheed Walker, which has turned out pretty darn well.
Jonathan Ford, who you're trying to cut.
They should just do offensive tackles, like just redshirt offensive tackle. Although Alex Light didn't turn out either. So, but yeah, they do weird things to keep some of those guys around from time to time. So I think Grant Dubose, Brenton Cox, potentially a couple of your redshirt guys this year. But we shall see. All right, I'll do the same thing for you. Newman, Jonathan Ford, Henry Pearson, Corey Ballantyne, Jonathan Owens, Pat O'Donnell. I think Pearson's the least likely of that group. But
no one likes my Pearson idea.
I also think
not one person.
I will, if he was healthy, I could entertain it more. I think not only like being probably a semi-long shot, but also being hurt definitely doesn't help things. But Royce Newman would be my next one on that list too. But you make a good argument too. I don't know what they do at interior offensive line if they do release him. So
if they can find another guard, I'm okay with turning Newman loose because I'm not attached to the idea of Royce Newman playing football for the Packers this season. It's just the numbers game. I'm like, you guys are going to need something. And, Caleb Jones is way too big to be playing guard. So,
yeah, no, I mean, so we know Caleb can't play guard. I don't think Yosh can play guard. Maybe Rasheed could play a little guard, like maybe. But I don't know that you're super pumped about that.
I don't think they've cross-trained him there, so I don't think.
No,
I mean, 1 week of practice, I don't think you're going to do it. I think it's probably Tom, just a guy, and then
for sure,
bring Walker off the bench, and then if Tom goes down, I guess that's when it's Sean Ryan time.
Yeah, great. All right, well, it should be interesting. Justis, this is absolutely amazing. Love going through this thought process with you. Tell the people where they can find your work and follow you on socials.
At JUMOSQ on Ghost Twitter, Zombie Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it.
X Twitter.
And you can find all my stuff at acmepackingcompany.com. We're covering the team. We're doing it every day. We're going to have podcasts up every day of the week, I think starting next week. So if you guys like hearing my voice, there's more of it there.
Go check it out. You're not going to be disappointed. Follow Justis at JUMOSQ. Find him at Acme Packing Company. You can follow the Pack a Day Podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Me at Andy Herman NFL. That's going to do it for us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.